Let's close out this episode by talking about one of those 6 at a little bit of a deeper pace, and that's Michael Bunting. He's starting to find his form because that's a player that we had been very hard on through the early portions of the season. He had struggled very mightily, 1 point in his first 12 games, and that was an assist. Since then, he has 3 points in his last 5 games, 2 goals and 1 assist. When he's on the ice at 5-on-5, according to Natural Stat Trick, the Penguins control 59% of the shots, 62% of the expected goals for, 55% of the scoring chances, and a astounding 67% of the high danger scoring chances, not to mention the fact that he's also playing much more physical over the last 5 games. He has 11 hits in those outings. How important is his resurgence to this Penguins team?
Vitally important. We knew how important he was when he was struggling. We pretty much had the same discussion of, if the Penguins can get him to wake up, if they can get him to find some consistency in production, maybe he can be a big reason why this team turns things around. I don't know where this team is by way of turning things around, even if Michael Bunting finds something. Mm-hmm. But he'll be a huge piece in making sure there is a net positive happening in Pittsburgh. Regardless of overall record, if Michael Bunting is on his game, then there's some positives to be had. And, when you put him at 3rd on your trade list, I think that even speaks more to you get him going. That becomes a very, very, very attractive piece. And you try and look into sort of what he did last year. I mean, he had a slow start with Carolina last year. They sent him to Pittsburgh, and look at that. He ended up being one of the most productive trade pieces of post-deadline. Mm-hmm. Now, it's unlikely something like that happens again, but so far he's riding that same wave. Mm-hmm. Slow start, starting to find something. Just depending where the Penguins go, maybe it is teardown season. He becomes part of that teardown. Maybe he finds a groove somewhere for probably a playoff team, but finds a groove somewhere elsewhere.
Yeah, and you mentioned what he did post-deadline. He was on a 23-goal, 74-point pace post-deadline. You'd like to see him get as close to that as humanly possible, but he's also capped out at 63 points in his NHL career, and that was back in 2021-22 season. So do you expect him to go out there and set career highs? No, but you want him to perform to that level as closely as possible, and we've started to see that a little bit more over the last 5 games. But as you mentioned there, like, him turning it around is not going to be the saving grace of this team. We're talking about this as a 5-game sample size. The Penguins are 1-2-2 in those 5 games. So he's not going to be able to be the saving grace. But here's the thing. The Pens are lacking overall top-tier talent, top-end talent. Whenever you trade away Jake Gensel, who's a 40-goal scorer, and I know people are tired of going back to this, but it shows as to what their actual belief is in this team. Whenever you trade away a player like that, you need your Brian Rusts, your Rickard Rakels, your Michael Buntings to all perform at the top of their ability, because the one player you picked to replace him was Drew O'Connor, was Anthony Beauvillier. Those are the players that have been in those spots this year. That's not gonna make up for it. Not to mention the fact that you have gotten 10 times worse defensively. So not only are you trying to make up for goals lost whenever you trade away a player like that, you're putting yourself further behind the 8 ball because of the defensive deficiencies that this team has kind of suffered. So with those facts in mind, he needs to be at his best, and that might not be 23 goals, 74-point pace like he was after the trade deadline last year, but it needs to be closer to what we've seen the last 5 games, and it cannot, and I cannot stress this enough, cannot be what we saw in the first dozen games of the season.
No kidding. It can't be anything like that. Not even lifeless stuff. I mean, maybe there was some juice there, but it wasn't equaling production. He just seemed invisible. He wasn't throwing his body into things like he should and normally does. We can't see that again from him. Going forward, it's got to be more of the pretty much immediately after we talked about him, after I predicted he would be the first to score out of him and
Cody Glass,
which, well, we see how that went. So,
yeah.
But not only did Michael Bunting score, he then seemed to find a bit more of his rhythm, find a bit more of what makes him Michael Bunting, what makes him so attractive in the NHL. That's just the kind of stuff you need. Again, it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't need to be career-defining stuff. It doesn't need to be huge sky high paces, but anything to help the team where you bring your game and everything else kind of follows along, because everything will follow along as long as you are just sticking to what made you Michael Bunting in the first place.
Yeah, there were really good spurts in last night's game between him, Brian Rust, and Evgeni Malkin on that second line. And I think that's exactly what you need. Like, yeah, they lost the game, but Michael Bunting was out there and helped lead to Brian Rust's first goal that started the comeback. He also set up Evgeni Malkin on a couple of really grade A opportunities. So that's what you need from him. And you need him to be the pest. We've said that on countless occasions. You need him to be the pest, because that's when he's feeling it. That's when he's at his best. The last thing that I'll say here before we go for today's episode is I wouldn't mind seeing him with Sidney Crosby. And this is one of those things where you look at it and you say, why haven't they tried that? He's played under 8 total minutes of 5-on-5 ice time with Sidney Crosby this year. I understand that last year when he was at his best, who was he playing with? Evgeni Malkin. I get it. But right now you're trying out guys like Anthony Beauvillier, who I will say, we talked about this before the show, has tied his goal total from last year already, which is nice, but 3 of those goals have come against the Detroit Red Wings. Can we do it on a little bit, can we look a little bit better? Because to me, whenever I watch Beauvillier, I'm looking at him saying, he's really not doing anything. And then every once in a while, he finds himself in the right spot and he puts the puck in the back of the net, which you can't complain too much about that. It helped get them a standings point yesterday. But I do think that it would be nice to see Michael Bunting get an opportunity with Crosby and Rickard Rakell. I think that could end up producing a lot for the Pittsburgh Penguins offensively.
Yeah, I don't hate that. At this point, this team is in the try anything mode, or at least it should be. Yeah. You saw Evgeni Malkin up there. Why not try Michael Bunting up there? If you're willing to take Malkin away from his natural center position, there's no reason why a winger shouldn't move up. And at this point, the experimental period is going to go on for a lot longer than we would have liked. I mean,
it might just be an experimental season for a while. That's where we're heading.
Exactly. So why not give him that shot next to Crosby? I mean, every time the Penguins get a big trade around the deadline, it has always been, they're here for Crosby. A couple days later, and they're on Malkin's line. It's just the way it's gone again with Michael Bunting. It's what happened with Phil Kessel. He was here to play with Crosby, ended up playing with Malkin, ended up making a great line, won the third line, but was mostly Malkin's line mate. And that's just been the situation with Bunting so far. They got him to play alongside Sidney Crosby because they traded away Jake Gensel. Well, he's playing alongside Malkin and doing great. So there's that. At this point, why not try it? It's just the experimental season. I don't have much more other than screw it, we ball.